Wetsuits, Farmer John's, Drysuits. What does it all mean? And most importantly, what should you be wearing when you go kayaking? Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the Headwaters channel. Seth here, and today we are going to be talking about wetsuits, dry suits, cold weather paddling apparel, what the upsides of each are, and why you might choose one over the other. So without further ado, we are going to jump straight into this thing, starting with the least expensive option first. All right, so here we are in our wetsuit. I am starting out with wetsuits because they are the least expensive, like I mentioned earlier. Some people might say debatable. Farmer John's you can also find for quite cheap, but you generally have to pair a Farmer John with something else if you actually want to stay warm. We'll talk more about that later, but the point is they're both pretty inexpensive options if you're just looking for something to keep you warm on the water when it's cold. So back to wetsuits. This is a nice Vissla suit that I actually bought for surfing this year. I'm up here in Oregon and Washington a lot. Very chilly water on the coast here. So it makes a ton of sense to have a wetsuit for that. This one is a 4.3, that is 4 millimeter, 3 millimeter, using those varying thicknesses of neoprene throughout the suit, and brand new runs about $250. Now, of course, not everybody's going to want to go out and spring $250 on a wetsuit, and that's fine. You can find them much cheaper, and you can also usually find them used at surf shops for anywhere from $50 to maybe $100. So there are some really inexpensive options out there to get you out. And that's why you would choose a wetsuit in the first place. Not everybody is going to want to splurge on something really expensive their first season kayaking in cold water. So maybe you just want to spend $50 or $100 to see if you're actually going to enjoy cold water paddling in the first place. A wetsuit is a great option for that. There are, however, a lot of downsides to kayaking in a wetsuit. Primarily, wetsuits are made for being wet. So if you're in a sport like surfing or freediving and you're in the water, you're gonna be pretty comfortable because you're already gonna be wet. Nothing's going to keep you from being wet down there. And there's always gonna kind of be a little membrane of water inside of your wetsuit. And on top of that, wetsuits are way easier to swim in. They are very form-fitting, right? Like you can just get in there and you don't have to worry about fabric parachuting out and slowing you down. The thing that makes that a downside, if you look at me right now, I'm gonna get really close. I don't know if you can see it. I'm sweating just from standing here, and it's not that hot. It's maybe 60 degrees today, but just from standing in this suit for a few minutes, I am already starting to sweat like crazy, because that's what neoprene does to you. It just holds heat in and it makes you so hot. And if you're not in the water, you're gonna get really toasty really fast. The biggest downside is if you're trying to go for a long paddle and you're wearing all neoprene like this, you are gonna be absolutely cooking real fast. And then you're just gonna be hanging out in a little thin membrane layer of your own sweat, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. And that is why we are about to move on. All right, next up we have the Farmer John. This, much like a wetsuit, is made of neoprene. This one's actually a little bit thinner. This is a nice Farmer John that the folks at Level 6 sent me. It is quite comfortable. Because it's a little thinner than that 4.3, I am not immediately melting. The other part of that is I also am not completely covered in neoprene. My shoulders and arms can still breathe, and this is great. But of course the downside to that is that they can also get really cold really fast. So a Farmer John by itself is actually not quite going to cut it for us for paddling in actual cold water. So we will need to add some things. Ta-da, things. On my left arm here, I've got a Level 6 Jericho neoprene shirt, and on my right arm, I have a Duke Drytop. So you can do a lot of different kinds of layering with Farmer Johns. In this case, I like this thin neoprene shirt because it's comfortable. It's not just neoprene on the inside, it's got this nice comfortable fabric. And then having the Drytop outside of that basically is like an outer shell. So it's like keeping almost all the water out so that you're not getting totally soaked. So we're gonna add those on real quick and then talk more about this setup. All right, so now we're all kitted out. We've got our dry top with our neoprene top under that, and then Farmer John on the very bottom. Boom, I am very warm right now. So let's talk about why you might go with a setup like this instead of just a wetsuit. From a monetary perspective, this particular setup is a little more expensive. The Farmer John by itself is about 55 bucks brand new. You can find Farmer Johns all over the place. They're pretty inexpensive. This dry top, the Duke from level 6, is 280 bucks. So that's where most of the cost of this setup is coming from. You can also find cheaper dry tops and used dry tops on the market. I just really like level 6 stuff. They've been a big supporter of the channel, and I've been using their gear for a couple of years now and I've been very happy with it. And then the neoprene top that I'm wearing kind of as a base layer under this dry top is about 100 bucks by itself. You could obviously get a cheaper fleece or something along those lines and get a similar result, but I like using the neoprene in this case because it's going to keep me very, very warm. So if you add all that up, what I'm wearing right now is about $435 worth of kit. If you got it all used, I'd say you could easily end up in that $200 to $250 range, possibly even cheaper, but still a little bit more than saying a $50 to $100 used wetsuit. So if it's that much more expensive, the question is why? Well, this is where you begin to have a little more control over your body temperature. The major downside of a wetsuit is that you get what you're wearing. So if you buy a 4-3 wetsuit, you have a 4-3 wetsuit. It's always going to be as hot as a 4-3 wetsuit is. If it's just a little bit cooler than you're comfortable with and you wear your wetsuit, you're gonna be cooking. If it's really, really freaking cold and you need something way thick, you're probably not gonna be warm enough in just a 4-3 wetsuit. So with wetsuits, even though the initial cost is cheaper, if you end up buying 2 or 3 wetsuits just so you can be ready for different temperatures, then you're not really saving yourself that much money. The nice thing with this is I can wear my Farmer John and then I can add varying layers underneath my dry top to basically adjust how warm I am. I could wear a really thick fleece. I could wear the neoprene thin layer like I'm wearing. I could wear like a really thin wool top. You have the ability to adjust that base layer to basically adapt to what's going on outside. On top of that, you now have a dry top, which is great for spring and fall paddling. Before you maybe even need your Farmer John, you might just be wearing a dry top with a really thin base layer and some paddling shorts. You've got something here that really is good all season. So once again, kind of our mid-range here for price. Somewhere in the $500 range, you can end up with a really nice setup like this and have some really useful materials that you can use pretty much year-round in different combinations. Now we are going to move on to the most expensive option, a Drysuit. Here we are in our Drysuit. This is the level 6 Emperor. I am a big fan of this suit. I've been using it for a while now. We will talk a little bit about why you might want one of these. As you saw a moment ago, I put on clothes under this. That is something that is very unique, and I cannot overstate how important it is. I mentioned when I was talking about wetsuits that you don't have the ability to adjust for the temperature outside. You get one thickness of wetsuit and that is what you are stuck with no matter how cold or warm it is. So with a dry suit, you buy your dry suit and it is just a shell. It has latex gaskets throughout that keep water out. It's got those on your neck. Your feet are going to be sealed in with booties. Sometimes they'll be fabric, same fabric as your dry suit's made out of. Sometimes they'll be made of latex. All depends on your preference and what suit you're buying. Basically, you are completely closed off from water. Nothing is perfect, of course. A little bit of moisture is always going to get in no matter what you're using, but you're going to be like really, really dry. So because this is just a shell, you can wear pretty much whatever you want to underneath it, and that allows you to make tons of adjustment based on the temperature. If it's springtime, it's getting a little warmer but the water's still really cold, you might just wear a really thin like wool base layer or polyester base layer under your suit because it's going to wick moisture away from your skin. If you have a nice dry suit like this one that's breathable, then basically you're going to feel really dry inside of your suit and really comfortable. If it's really, really, really cold and it's the middle of winter, you can go nuts on layering and put pretty much as much clothing under one of these as you can fit. You've got things like union suits that are made of fleece. People will pile on like fleece sweatpants, fleece tops. I've even heard of people wearing puffy jackets under their dry suits. So you can really go ham on how much you wear under this to stay really, really toasty. Having that adjustment allows you to just have one suit like this one that will keep you really comfortable no matter what, and also keep you dry. Another really nice thing about dry suits is they are typically repairable. So if you get a hole in it or something like that, you can send it back to the manufacturer or take it to a repair shop and have them patch it up for you, and it'll be as good as new. You probably saw when I was suiting up that I did a shoulder zip here. A lot of people will think, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. That's okay. There are a lot of different options for that too. Some have chest zips, some dry suits even zip in half. You'll see some kits that have like a bib and a dry top that roll together. So there are a lot of ways that you can put on a dry suit. That's totally up to preference. I like the shoulder zip because it doesn't put stuff on my chest and up front. I've always found that the chest zip seems to kind of rub on me under my PFD, whereas the shoulder zip stays pretty out of the way. It doesn't bug me. So that's why I went with this suit. But if you're lacking shoulder mobility, you can't really reach back there, then chest zips totally make sense. Dry suits really are garments that will last you a long time. You've probably seen people paddling around in dry suits that are 20, maybe even 30 years old, and that happens. So if you take good care of something like this, then it can last you as long as you kayak, or just until you're ready to get a newer one. So you're probably wondering, okay, that sounds great. How much is that going to cost me? This suit, the Emperor from Level 6, is $1,100. Once again, you can find cheaper suits. You can find used suits. Typically, you won't find many for under 500 bucks used these days, just because they are pretty expensive new and there's not a huge used market for them. So ultimately, to wrap up on dry suits, they are the most comfortable way to paddle. They are made for being worn in wet places where you aren't going to be wet the entire time, aka kayaking. So I fully believe that it is worth spending the extra money if you can to get a dry suit. Keep yourself comfortable on the water, because if you're comfortable on the water, you're going to spend more time out there and you're going to have more fun. And that is the goal. Well, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to leave us a like and subscribe. We're going to have a lot more great content coming this year as we're just getting started with the summertime. If you have any more questions that I didn't cover in the video, be sure to leave those in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you. And as always, happy paddling. We'll see you on the next one. Party people, party, party, party.